Morning, York East. I swear I'm not contagious. And this is the best I've sounded since Thursday afternoon. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to liberty and please be seated. All right. Guests.
Good morning. We have one guest this morning, our speaker, Martin Fedorko. If you could please stand.
Please join me in welcoming Matthew. All right, 50-50. I think that was the consolation prize for not having a voice. All right, happy dollars. On.
I'm sorry, I took your party that you had here for me. I completely missed it.
Anybody else? Okay. Karen.
I have a happy dollar just to thank Todd and Dawn King for hosting the Christmas party and also giving Jeremy and I a tour of their lovely barn, which is awesome if you haven't been there.
I have two happy dollars, one for Todd and one for Dawn for hosting again. They do a great job. So, anybody else? $3 for Dawn and Todd. All right. Sorry, folks, it's Bad Joke Tuesday. Why is December such a cold month? Because it has brr in the name. It was appropriate, you have to admit. All right, anniversaries. This month, John Schmidt celebrates 38 years with us, a Rotarian. Don Wonders, congratulations on 36 years. Nick Agarwal has 29. Deb Kleindens has 24 years with our club. Victoria Dick has 12. And Scott Burford, happy anniversary. This is your first year anniversary. So happy birthday to Charles Worcester, which celebrated on December 2nd. Joanna Bankos, thank you, Christina, for saying congratulations because her birthday is today. Jim Norton, yours is coming up on the 16th. And Greg Kern, your birthday is the 20th. So happy birthday to all. Let's give a round of applause. I think the Kings know how happy we were that they opened up their home, but I want to just make it official. Club service. Jim, you want to come up?
Morning, everybody.
gift giving, I think we're in awfully good shape. Thank you for everybody. I'm going to need a bigger car, so maybe we can work that into the budget here, but bell ringing, I don't know if anybody's filling it in, but we still needed 4 when I brought the sheet in here today, and that's the 20th, which is the Saturday after next. So if you can check your schedules, hopefully that sign-up sheet is making its way around here in the 20th. So thank you. You, Chris.
Thank you, Jim. All right. I think we're ready for our speaker. Meredith, want to come up and introduce? Oh, Connie. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you all who have ordered poinsettias already. They are quite beautiful.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, Martin Fedorko, who is the managing partner for White Rose Ventures with nearly 10 years of experience in investment management across corporate and startup environments. For me personally, I got to know Martin through my role at the Community Foundation, and I just think the work he's doing there is really dynamic and interesting. So I'm looking forward to hearing his presentation. Feel free to ask him questions. He's very knowledgeable, and I'm sure he'll enjoy having more of an interaction with each of you. So without further ado, Martin, please welcome him to our meeting this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, let me figure this out. Is this too loud? This is good, right? Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Before I get started here, I just want to say, so I'm a member of a Rotary Club as well, and I just appreciate so much the work that goes on here in your community. I often say it can be the foundation of some of the things we do here in this community, and I appreciate so much what you all do. So thank you for having me. I'm here to talk about a few things, but mainly just venture capital and what we're doing today to really help drive innovation from, of all places, York, Pennsylvania, to go across the state. So first, just a quick background on me. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, flip-flopped across the state. So I went to high school actually at Cumberland Valley in Mechanicsburg, went back to Pitt for school, and was out there until, it'll be 10 years in January that I moved here. And really, what I want to say there too is when I was living in Pittsburgh, I was a government bond trader for a mutual fund firm called Federated Investors, now Federated Hermes. And the only reason I bring that up is I was a very, call it corporate person. I was just, not that my job wasn't exciting or anything. What I often say is the job that I thought I always wanted when I went to school. Meaning, it kind of felt like Wall Street in a way. You have a million computer screens, it looks over the stadiums in Pittsburgh. And it was a job, again, that you go to school for thinking, oh, that'd be great. And until I realized after a year or two that, I'm really stuck in my seat 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. And that's not because I had a, micromanaging boss or anything like that. It was just the nature of the job. So when you're trading government bonds, you're trading a lot of headline risk. And if something happens in the world, you just have to be there. And if you're not, it's kind of on you. So it's just the nature of the position. That said, though, I loved it. I learned a ton, but we all have those inflection points in life where we're, do I want to do this for another 30 years or 40 years? And a few things kind of came together. But one was, there's a guy that I went to high school and college with who I just saw maybe on LinkedIn or something was starting a startup in York, Pennsylvania. Now, for me, York was not a random area at the time. My wife is born and raised here in York, graduate of York Suburban. But aside from that, I mean, I had a good job, and startups. I didn't even know what it was, to be honest. And I don't know about you guys, but if you go to some of these websites, I'm going back 10, 12 years now. I'm looking at these websites, and they're all doing great work, but there's ping pong tables and happy hours and things like that, things that were just foreign to me. And so like, this doesn't look like work. But I started, I reconnected with him. I started talking to him, and long story short, I came to be part of the founding team for this startup here in York, Pennsylvania, called Benjamin and Bond. Fast forward to August of 2020. That consultancy was acquired by WellSpan. And prior to that, of course, we were a healthcare consultancy. We were just trying to grow the firm, but we were also starting a venture fund there as well, which is really how I became known throughout the city anyway, as someone who's just raising money for this venture fund. And when the acquisition of the company ended up going through, that venture fund went by the wayside, all made sense. But I was approached by a few folks here in town, really just talking about maybe what might be next, and really just kind of inquiring, asking all the qualifying questions about what the future could be for venture capital. And I got all the qualifying questions here. Are there enough companies here? That's one thing. Is there enough money? The answer is yes. And again, going back to February of 2020, sorry, I'm getting a little storytelling here. It was February, I'll never forget, it was February 29th, 2020, that I was able to present to a group of foundation heads here in New York about the idea of starting this venture fund here. And luckily that meeting went really well. It was embraced a lot, but a lot of us have had strokes of luck in our lives for a lot of different reasons. And I often bring that up, as if that meeting was scheduled 2 weeks later, I seriously might not be doing this. It was just kind of nuts. But so I'm going to try to get back on this script here if I can. So we started White Rose Ventures in 2020, with really the fund kicking off in 2021. Really, stepping back, there was this. What I want to say about York was, we noticed that there was a lot of business support here. Whether it's some from the Ben Franklin's of the world, the YCEAs of the world, community found. There's a lot of different. It's a very philanthropic community, but also there's a lot of business support. But there wasn't really business support for those folks who wanted to grow venture-like businesses. And what do I mean by that? You're often running at a deficit for a while. It's not something that's quote unquote bankable. Actually, that's why venture capital exists, is because these companies in theory are not bankable. It doesn't mean they're bad companies. It just means that right now they either they aren't cash flowing, or they don't have the collateral needed to satisfy a bank. That's part of the reason why venture exists. And we really wanted to complement what was going on here in the community, and really say we wanted York or Central Pennsylvania to really be an area that entrepreneurs knew they could start and grow businesses here of all kinds. And to date, or at least to date there wasn't really an option for those folks that wanted to raise, call it significant dollars while being quote unquote not bankable. And that's what we kind of wanted to fill the gap here. But one of the things that I went back to as well is, there was often, it's like, I remember someone talking to me and saying, just like, Martin, I get it, but what companies? What are you talking? Like, where are these companies? Where are they? And there was this real question of whether they exist here. And what I have to say is there are far, far more companies that I'm talking about that exist here than we may know. And it was even new to me a little bit. The only reason I knew is because back in my previous company, there were, what's interesting, when you are out there as a source of capital, no matter what it is, you get a lot of inquiries. And what we were able to understand is, when you're out there as a fund that has this capital, you get inquiries from all types of folks that are raising venture money, or folks that just want to sell stakes in businesses, any sort of, you're just seen as capital. that could accommodate anything, on the, private market side of things. And so, one, it was very validating to start this, knowing too that we were, kind of off to a good foundation. So what do we do here today? First, White Rose Ventures, we connect capital with entrepreneurs. I would say too, sorry, I need to stay. I could ramble forever. We need to connect capital, we support founders, and right today we're bridging Pennsylvania innovation, and I'll get to that in a little bit as well. Today, the fund is, it is an $11.9 million fund that we started investing in November of 21. Right now, we have $9.2 million of capital invested across 13 portfolio companies. These are metrics too that we're extremely proud of. These are well, at least the economic multiplier is called a non-return metric. But for one, our metrics are top quartile across the board for venture funds of our size. And when I talk about capital leverage and economic multiplier, so these are metrics that Ben Franklin keeps track of and folks that are interested in economic development, because you want to be able to show a return, not just on an investment, but also to just how much is that bringing to a region? If you're raising X capital, how much more is that bringing in to a region? And right now, we're proud to say that 4.6x of our dollars has been raised into the companies that we have put money into. This is just a quick snapshot of our, I was just telling Meredith too, I could talk about all of our portfolio companies, but when I talk about these three, it really is a microcosm of what a central Pennsylvania fund could look like. So I say on one end, Noculogix, it's a non-invasive neural earbud that is rivaling Elon Musk's Neuralink. What I love, it's winning every award possible across the planet. But what I love the most is the founder was a guy from Red Lion, and he did it out of Harrisburg University. That is really cool, because that should be somebody from Stanford or MIT. It's that type of technology. And to be able to validate that something like that can be created here is incredibly great. On the very far end, you have hand-twisted pretzels. Now, how do hand-twisted pretzels fit into a venture business? Now, what I say is hand-twisted is really the only non-automated part of that business. But also, too, I go back to the beginning when we first started looking at them. We obviously we look at all types of businesses, but when you look at venture too, one of the things that you want to focus on is their growth. How fast are they growing? And at the time, the pretzel company was growing just as fast as any other software business that we were looking at as well. Obviously, it had a great story for us, trying to be a homegrown venture fund from the very beginning. And right now, that is, I don't want to get too far ahead of things or knock on wood, but that is just doing fantastic for us. And it's just such a great example of what is possible when some of this capital can exist. And then in the middle, you have Wove. And Wove, some of you may have heard of this, but a couple of years ago, they kind of caught the Taylor Swift bug, if you will. Maybe I'll tell it quick. So Wove is an e-commerce jewelry company. And about a couple years ago, 2 years ago now, so it was right around, it was in the AFC Championship. So if you remember a couple years ago, the Chiefs, they were not meant to go to the Super Bowl. They were a good team, but they weren't exactly like destined to go to the Super Bowl that year. I only say that to mean this was not scripted by any stretch of the imagination. The CEO of Wove, Simone Kendall, we're pretty close. She couldn't even tell me this, but so I found out like everybody else. But when they won the AFC Championship, sorry, I just want to make sure I don't drop it. There's a picture of Taylor Swift going to hug Travis Kelce. And if you're short and you hug somebody tall, your sleeves roll up. And she had this bracelet on. And it was a TNT bracelet, TNT being Travis and Taylor. And Wove made that bracelet. And look, I feel like I'm at the odd age where, my kids are just starting to learn about Taylor Swift. It's not, I know about Taylor Swift like everybody else. Holy moly. When something is attached to Taylor Swift's name, things just explode. And that was a company that was doing well before that, and then just saw their revenue absolutely spike. And it was such an interesting time, honestly, too, because you like to think these companies like, okay, everybody get to work. I mean, it was 8 people, at the time. And so that kind of, call it 3x revenue growth over like a quarter is it stretches a company, and I wouldn't say it was stressful, but it was, a lot of things we had to figure out behind the scenes of how we could make sure that we could fulfill the demand for this, but also to leverage it for the future. I remember at the time thinking, geez, if Q2 numbers can it just match Q1 numbers, that would be awesome. And it actually exceeded it. So we kept that level of revenue growth, and it's just been, again, you could think about it like a lottery ticket kind of thing, but honestly, you have to be in the game to be able to do it. And right now, when you have folks like Simone who just have, a network across the country, really, these sorts of things are able to happen, and they can happen to companies that are here in central Pennsylvania. This is just a snapshot of the rest of our portfolio. I said we have 13 companies. You only see 12 there. We had a company very early on that was just what I'll call a COVID casualty. And it was a CPG business. It couldn't get back on the lines for testing, and it was just unfortunate what happened. But this is a snapshot right now of our portfolio. Happy to dive into any companies there, but truly humbled that we were able to start this, and that, I don't want to call it an experiment so much because it's, you could call it an expensive experiment, but it's starting to work, and you're starting to see the numbers there as well. Next, I want to talk about kind of where we went with, I don't even know why I'm flipping this, I'm not sticking to it. Summer of 23, the only other venture firm in the middle of the state is 1855 Capital. They're in State College. And essentially, long story short, Matt Rhodes is the general partner there. He is in his mid-60s, and he's had a successful first fund. So he raised the first fund up in State College 3 or 4 years before we did. And essentially, so these are 10-year term funds. What he was saying was, yeah, I'd love to raise a second fund, but I don't want to have to tell my investors, I'm going to be, close to 80 years old managing this, when I'm done with it. So he's really looking for a transition plan of some sort. We worked together a lot on a couple companies, actually going back, Pledge It and Reflection. And also too, just it's the same ecosystem that we're all in. I say Central Pennsylvania is blue and white through and through. I'm a Pitt grad, so it's hard to say that, but it is blue and white through and through. And the idea of being able to connect the innovation going on in Penn State with what I call just gritty, incredible founders here in Central Pennsylvania was something that was really appealing, not just to us as we were growing, but to our investors as well. Together, this is what we try to achieve. When you're starting White Rose Impact Fund, which is our first fund, it really is, I hate saying it's an experiment, but you're trying to make sure that this works. And now what we realize is this does work, and we need to really expand it and make sure that we can deliver what we want to, for our goals across the state. So one, we are developing a capital alliance. Now it's not just one fund, it's 2 funds being able to leverage not just the investors that we have today, but also to just say, hey, listen, we've done X, Y, Z, and now we're starting to grow and really be that institutional firm that I feel Pennsylvania needs on the private market side of things. De-risked investments. So what's great about the amount of support, I'll call, across the state and central Pennsylvania is that there's a good amount of it, but also too, if anyone's familiar with Ben Franklin Technology Partners, I mean, it's a government, government-backed agency, if you will, but their job is to essentially help companies on the very earliest stages. Not that we can't do that or won't do that, but that is tough. It's tough work. It's tough work to be able to just take in founders a lot. And now we have a team that can kind of do that. But the way we pitch it is Ben Franklin's able to really support these types of founders. Not everyone has a venture backable business or anything like that, but the ones that do, the anecdote I usually say is, they'll make 10 investments a quarter. The next quarter or 2 quarters later, they'll come to me and say, Martin, those 10 investments we made, you should really check out these 3. And that, honestly, that anecdote there is invaluable to folks like us because you have seasoned, experienced investors that are really helping build the foundation for some of these companies to grow and scale. And for us to be able to kind of piggyback, if you will, off that is, again, it's invaluable for folks like us. And overlooked companies, I could say overlooked, I could say undervalued. Both are true. What's great about being in our position is, well, it's a pro and a con. There's not a lot of capital in this state that invests in venture. Even in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, there's just not a lot of venture capital money in Pennsylvania. When you invest in companies, if you invest in a public stock, for example, the stock price, right? Usually on the private market side of things, you're looking at valuations more, like what's the valuation of the company. You will never find valuations lower than in a place like Central Pennsylvania and places like Central Pennsylvania. And it has nothing to do with the quality of the businesses, nothing. It has everything to do with the fact that it's just not enough capital. For folks like us, that's a great, area to dive into. It sounds weird when I talk to folks in San Francisco or New York or major metros. Oh, there we go. Great. Forget where I left off there. But anyway, I was saying, low valuations, but also too, when I was talking to folks, so we've never competed for a deal in our lives. And I don't mean that in a proud way or not proud way. It's just the reality of it, where, the game in a lot of major metros is you're competing for the best deals. You really are. You're pitching yourself as a firm. Why, as a firm, you want to you'll be the best, board members, et cetera, for these companies. Here, we are very much the folks that people go to. And I love that position. I can get more granular about how we're different from Ben Franklin being a government agency. There's a lot of restrictions they have, especially in, sometimes too, what founders really, really need early on. But I feel really fortunate that we're able to step in and be that, not just that sounding board, but that amplifier for these companies here in the region. So the Keystone Innovation Fund is what's coming together with White Rose Ventures and 1855 Capital. We are actually having a first close here in the middle of January 26. Right now, it's a headline $30 million fund. We have $15 million raised right now. We'll probably be at 20 by the time we do that. But that's really our successor fund. That's going to be our second fund that we invest in with the same sort of thesis, except that we are going across the state with a focus on Central Pennsylvania. I just want to highlight some of the folks on our team as well. Matt Rhodes is the guy I mentioned. He's the managing partner for 1855 Capital. Alec Galante is the guy, he's a fractional CFO for a couple of our companies, but also too, he runs a family office as well, and is just, I feel fortunate, just one of the smartest guys I know, and want to just feel very fortunate to have it. And also Ben Franklin is technically part of this in a smaller way. Happy to expand on that further if it's of interest. And then kind of transitioning to the last third. So I try to talk about kind of where we started, what we're doing today, and kind of where we're going with all of this. So over the past 5 or 6 years, obviously we've noticed a ton of things, but you notice a ton of things that where there are supports out there, but when you think about in our shoes, our goal is to it's kind of changed over the years, and it always encompasses this, but we want Central Pennsylvania to be a place where people say you can start and grow any type of business. But also too, we want that to be an area where outside investors can come in and say, oh, geez, I had no idea this was going on in Central Pennsylvania, or this was going on in Central Pennsylvania. There's no marketplace necessarily for that. And what I mean by that is no one just says like, oh, I'm looking for great companies. Oh, here's one in Central Pennsylvania. It takes folks like us to be able to, like I said before, amplify those types of companies and be able to advocate for them. Because there's nothing that brings more trust to outside investors than when there are actual investors with skin in the game here that can advocate for those. But when it comes to building out an institutional firm, I've noticed things that, so this goes back to investment versus economic development and how things are portrayed. And one thing that I've noticed, and I have nothing bad to say about Ben Franklin Technology Partners or any other economic development sort of initiative. We hope that every single company of ours has the most economic development impact possible, but it's not how we underwrite our investments. We do feel that that's one of the best ways to do it as a secondary benefit, but we don't use that to underwrite our investments in any way. So why is that important? It's important because investors sometimes, when there's a lot of economic development activity going on, some folks get confused and a little fuzzy on, okay, are they making that investment because it's actually going to return 5x? Or are they making that investment because it's going to create 100 jobs? And that sort of difference, it makes a big, that makes a big difference in the amount of capital that you can see come into a region, either into these companies or into support networks. But one, just going through these, one is, a fragmented ecosystem. I keep saying it's great that we have all these resources. I will admit that they are a little fragmented, there's overlap in a lot of them. And I think from call it a founder journey standpoint, it can be really difficult to figure out, should I go here? Should I go there? Should I go there? Limited capital, I already spoke to that before. It's just a challenge. And everything that we do with White Rose and now Keystone Innovation, it's really with this idea that we are trying to bring more and more dollars to this asset class that never thought about it before, which I think is just super cool. And then the third one is a little granular, lack of IP spinouts. This just goes more to the broader innovation ecosystem across Pennsylvania. It may be surprising to some of you if you look at, so we work with Pitt and Penn State. I'll get to that in a second. Two major R1 universities. R1 means that they have over $500 million in research expenditures every year. But you would be surprised, I think some of you might be, that folks like Pitt and Penn State, and really any major university outside of the ones you might think of, like Stanford or MIT, they really struggle with translating their technologies into commercial businesses. They really, really do. And that's something that, again, from a Pennsylvania lens, is something that we want to address. And it's through these opportunities. One, what we really want to start is this investment flywheel across central Pennsylvania. What do I mean by that? When we start investing, we want folks to be as ready as possible for institutional capital. That could be us, that could be any other institutional firm. But eventually, and I'll show the flywheel here later, eventually there will be successful businesses. And of those successful businesses, there will be exits. And so you'll have companies where founders make some money, employees make some money, and investors make money. And what are they likely to do with at least some of that money? Reinvest it back into the ecosystem, find companies that they like, things that they identify with, and continue to invest in this area. And that's how we feel we can really start to grow the platform we have here in central Pennsylvania as a place that can really grow great businesses. I mentioned capital attraction. It really is, at least for me anyway, I don't want to call it the North Star, but it's something I think about every day. It's just like, are we doing something that can attract more eyeballs and more capital to this asset class? And lastly, a statewide network. I think there is just such room to be able to connect what's going on across the state because, again, it's just extremely fragmented. And that's where Keystone Innovation Collaborative came in. So I probably just misordered the, but here's the flywheel. And like I said, the more that we can get this thing moving, and it doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't happen in a year, but once it is starting, it's a flywheel. And this is something that we really want to dig into as a way to really prop up central Pennsylvania. And as again, sorry, I'm speaking more from the heart here. We're not trying to like be the next like Chicago or New York City or anything like that. Far from it, actually. We just want this place to be accommodating for all entrepreneurs. It's exciting. The companies that are spun out by these founders, the technologies they work on, they're incredible. They're incredible, but also too, they really become narration points for what is possible in a region. And the more and more that we can kind of move through that, the better. So right now with Keystone Innovation Collaborative, what I really say is the high end is we're making Central Pennsylvania the connective tissue for all innovation going in across the state. It's a bold sort of statement to say that, at least for me anyway. It's a bold statement to say, like, listen, we're gonna, when you have folks like Ben Franklin and stuff like that, I've just noticed that, when you have a return first fund, that, again, it's not like this is a York fund or a Lancaster fund or a Harrisburg fund, but it's meant to make the best investments possible here. You need different kinds of support, but you also need a lot of deals. And there's no better way to do that than to connect some of the on-the-ground gritty entrepreneurs in Central Pennsylvania growing businesses, pair them, or at least the opportunity, with a lot of the technologies coming out of these schools. If there's one thing that, if over the past year, we've all been kind of become familiar now with a lot of the research grants that come to these universities and all that kind of stuff. What I'll say is, I worked with the universities before, but until some of that stuff happened earlier in the year, I personally, I was not 100% sure just how much money they were receiving every year. So you look at Pitt, Penn State, Penn, Drexel, Lehigh. I mean, you're talking about $1 billion a year, roughly. $1 billion a year in research grants. And what I say is, like, there's nobody that's kind of saying, like, I want to piggyback off of that. Like, of $1 billion that go into these schools every year, oh my gosh, there's incredible technologies that are coming by. But there's just structural issues in there. And that's where I want to make sure that we are positioning ourselves well to make sure that we are aggregating the best innovation and best founders across the state. Just as an update today, we do have a lot of early momentum here. We were going to be launching this at the beginning of the year too, just with the Keystone Innovation Fund. We've raised a little over $1 million for this. This is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's meant to be our sister organization for White Rose. And right now, so far, so good on the fundraising side of things. University partners are being locked in. We are, knock on wood, I believe, securing a place right on the square in downtown York, that we want to be a place that people see as, for lack of a better term, a marketing piece for what is happening here in York, Pennsylvania. And lastly, just with the flywheel model, I said, I think that that's something that we can really have humming here over the next few years. And that's my last slide. I appreciate you all so much. What I say is I'm open to any questions. I wanted to fly through that because I never know sometimes what might be interesting to folks, what might not be. So wanted to fly through everything I did here. But happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
I saw on one screenshot, basic valuation. It's not proprietary of the portfolio clients, which company, or what is the total valuation of a large company?
Good question. So, I can answer that and then I'll explain it a little bit. So yeah, so when I look at this, the highest valuation is Nakilogics. And they're actually raising around right now at about 120 million. Actually, if you don't mind, I'll say this real quick. So the founder of Nakilogics is a guy named Dave Siegel. When we were raising that venture fund at Benjamin and Bond, he was one of the first people to knock on our door. And let's call it 2018. And great idea. Obviously, he had multiple patents for what he was doing. And I'll never forget that first meeting with him, where he was. I remember at the end of the meeting, I go, "Geez, this is great. What's the problem?" And he said, "I can't find any money. Like, no one can invest." He had one investor here in York, and he's like, "But like, that money's running out, and I don't know what to do." And so he's been working at it for a bit, but he's been building the patent portfolio. And it wasn't until, 2021 that a major investor came in and said, "Listen, we're going to run with this." And that's kind of what led to where they're at today. But I tell that story one. Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's a major technology. And no, certainly proud to have it here. I also love that story because it's just, again, it just shows just one, like you have incredible folks around here. We just need to put the right supports around them to make it make sense. Guess I'm, oh. Good question. So what we want to get to is equity. And sometimes that is just through an equity investment. It really depends on the round that they're raising. Oftentimes in venture, there'll be convertible notes at first. And the reason for that is instead of making equity investments so let's take Noculogics for an example. When we first made the investment, they weren't generating any revenue. How do you really put a valuation on a company, this early on? And one of the reasons why a convertible note makes sense is it's obviously meant to convert, but also too, it does push that valuation conversation down the road a little bit until there are more proof points of, just again, what this company could be worth. And when I say that, it kind of sounds like, we're just kind of throwing stuff against the wall, like valuation. It's really, when you come with valuations, you're trying to build a market for a company. And it's not about like, oh, I just want to have a $1 billion valuation fund. Well, you have to have investors that want to invest in that. So it's really a way, like when you're raising a valuation, you want to set the valuation so that you can raise the money that you need there. But to answer your question, whether our first investments are in equity or in a convertible note or debt, we eventually want to get to equity because that's how we make money then, is through exits in these businesses, whether they're acquired, which is most likely to be the case around here, or they go public.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you, Mark.
Thank
for
you.
your presentation.
Appreciate it. Well,
Passion for what you do definitely comes through your presentation. So thank you very much. To thank you for coming today, we'll choose a children's book that will be donated to a local library, either at the YWCA or at Children's Aid Society. So don't leave before you pick out your book. All right, folks. So just a gentle reminder, we are off the week of Christmas and New Year's. So no meeting on 12/23 or 12/29. However, next Tuesday, the 16th, will be our last meeting for 2025. So hope to see you there. Have a good week, everybody.